Formerly of your Cincinnati Reds, Bronson Arroyo, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Buddy, it's always a pleasure. And you said you were down at the facility this morning about to work out, and you ran into the two coaches.
Yeah, I was. I go down there quite often just to mix it up with the clubhouse guys and see those guys and hang out a little bit. And I was headed down there regardless, and I called down, and Bryan was down there, and then Mac Jenkins wound up coming in around 3:30. But yeah, I had a good conversation with both of them. More with Bryan, but he was in as good a mood as you could possibly be. He's a really reasonable, smart guy, and he understands what he was facing coming into the season. He had a meeting the last day of the season last year in Chicago, and he basically said, "Hey guys, there's 20 of you here that are young guys coming in for next year. They'll probably be on this ball club, and it's time for us to put up or shut up. We've got to get the job done next year, or I know that I won't be back at 10. So he knew what he was facing coming into the season. Obviously, he didn't think he'd be axed this quick, but he obviously didn't expect to get off to such a terrible start as well.
Right.
So Bronson, as a guy who's been on this team, been in this clubhouse, obviously knows Bryan Price, and I know you like Bryan Price, but do you think that ultimately this was the right move or the wrong move for the Reds?
Well, I always tend to lean on the fact that, players are the guys that get the job done. I mean, for me personally, I think you could have a computer print out the lineup card every day, and if you've got fantastic players, you're going to win, more than half your games, and if you don't, you're going to lose. I mean, I think obviously the manager plays a role in the mood that he brings to the clubhouse, the respect that he garners. He obviously wins and loses some ball games with his strategy and how he performs with his bullpen, laying down bunts, calling steals, and all those subtleties of the game. But if you don't have the meat and potatoes, which is, for me, 5 guys on the mound that can put up quality starts, then, I think, you got your back up against the wall no matter who you are as a manager. But given the fact they got up to a bad start, given the fact that it was probably questionable whether Bryan was going to come back this year at all, getting off to such a bad start, I think they had to make some sort of move to shake things up, even if it's not solely on these guys as all their fault, which it isn't. But the fact is, you've got to make some sort of change because things just aren't going right.
So, Bronson, look, I was speculating earlier in terms of whoever the next manager. I don't know who that person is, but in terms of style, I look at it and I see a team that's young. And it could maybe use more of a kind of enforcer type manager, less of a player's coach kind of guy. I love your thoughts. Am I on the right track, off the right track? Again, given that this is kind of a younger roster, a veteran roster, a veteran team can maybe deal with a coach that's a little more player friendly, things like that. But I just wonder, does this roster need a coach in there that's going to kind of come lay the law down a little bit more? What's your thoughts?
I don't know. It's a very fine line because, when you're asking young players to perform, they've got a lot of pressures on their head as it is. And if you have a manager who's a little too harsh, sometimes you can have guys walking on eggshells around the locker room. It's very difficult to perform under those circumstances as well. But you also, like you said, you want somebody to keep things in line, to make people understand that getting those bunts down, those important situations, not making base running errors, those types of mental mistakes are going to be, there's going to be consequences for them. And so, it's a very fine balancing act that you're trying to do there. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, for me, I like I said, I always just lean on quality starts. I mean, you've got 4 or 5 quality starts from this staff in 18 outings, 3 of them coming from Homer Bailey, and you've got 3 wins, which is about par for the course. If they put up, I always say you got to put up 2 out of every 3 starts. You need to put up a quality start. So if you pitch 32 times in a year, if you can put up 20 quality starts, that's your job. That's what you're supposed to do. So if they had 12 quality starts out of the last 18 games, you're probably looking at 10 wins at the worst, right? 10-8, maybe 9-9, and now we're not talking about the situation. So for me, it always lands on those 5 guys' plates, and they're so young on this staff. We want them to get off to a good start. We want them to get the job done, but they just haven't so far.
Bronson Arroyo is our guest. And Bronson, how did this locker room respond to Bryan?
The guy loved Bryan.
Because he always seemed like he was a pretty mellow guy. I mean, I don't know as far as, laying the law down, how that went, but it seemed like everybody liked him. And supposedly, he was, and heck, you should know as well as anybody, a bit of a pitching guru who knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, he definitely garnered respect. He wasn't a softie, I mean, by any means. I remember my first year that he came in. He didn't know me real well, but he knew that I had a bit of a track record. But he wanted to lay the law down a little bit. We got off to a bad start his first year as a pitching coach, and I remember we were about 2 weeks into the season, or maybe not even. And he came in and he had this meeting with us, and I remember it was probably like a fourth inning, and I used to eat food during the game sometimes around third, fourth, fifth inning, get a little hungry, eat some food, and go back out to the bench. And he just that day it just didn't resonate with him, and he was irritated, and he threw in the meeting, that I was eating a plate of spaghetti during the game, and he was pissed off, and he let me have it a little bit.
That's
and
cool.
he wasn't a soft guy that wouldn't lay the law down if he needed to,
Gotcha.
but he also was smart enough to realize that everybody had to be dealt with kind of in a different way, because we all have different personalities, and you're trying to make this team gel together, and you don't want people to feel like he's the principal. Right? You want to feel like the manager is pulling on the same rope as you and not it's somebody who you're disconnected to. And I think he did a great job at doing that. But that being said, it doesn't guarantee you any wins or losses,
Right. Now, Bronson, as you said earlier, one of the biggest problems with this team has been that the pitching, the young pitching hasn't developed. From your perspective, a guy who's been there and is a pitcher and knows what's going on, is it the players aren't getting developed? Is it the wrong players are getting picked? What would you put, if you had to put your finger on one thing, why hasn't the pitching developed at the rate we all hoped and thought it would?
Well, I think part of the problem is that, when I first came up in the game in around 2000, I got to the big leagues, and, you'd sit in the locker room, and if you looked at the 25 guys, there was 20 guys that were over 30 years old. And then you have 3 or 4 young guys in the team who are learning from those guys, and you weren't depending on them. When I was in the Boston Red Sox locker room and winning the World Series in 2004, I was 28 years old, and I was considered basically like a punk on that team. And I was like the water boy. I was pitching in the 5-hole behind Schilling, Wakefield, Pedro Martinez, and Derek Lowe. And these guys were all in their mid-30s, and I wasn't having to carry so much of the load, right? But as the game has gotten younger and younger, and we don't want to pay players, so we bring these young guys up because they're making not that much money, and also they're physically throwing so hard that they look like they're prepared to pitch in the big leagues, but mentally they're still 22, 23 years old. And so I think part of the problem is that in years past you would have 3 or 4 veteran pitchers, in a rotation, and you depend on one guy who's 24 years old, like a Tyler Mahle or a Castillo. Now you're taking a rotation and putting 4 out of the 5 guys as those young bucks, and it just doesn't work that easily. You can't expect these guys to come up and just go, boom, put up 20 quality starts. It just doesn't happen.
Bronson, is there a name that sticks out for you that you would like to see take over this team? I mean, again, pure speculation.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know the names that have been tossed around a little bit. I know Barry Larkin has been in the organization, and people talk about Barry a lot, and he brings obviously a ton of credibility to the table. I've seen some managers that were fantastic players that weren't great managers, and vice versa. So, it remains to be seen what Barry will bring to the table as a manager. I know John Farrell's in the organization now, and you hear whispers about that. He obviously did a good job over in Boston, but like I said, he had a bigger payroll to work with, and he had fantastic talent. It's a different ball game when you come to a smaller market and you're dealing with a really young ball club. So I don't know what the answer is, to be honest with you. I mean, I think you just play out the rest of the season as is, and you hope that these guys get on a winning streak here and kind of dig in, and you say, okay, at least we're on the right track, and we don't have to try to break this thing apart, because at the end of the day, they've already been rebuilding for 3 or 4 years, and there's not many places to go except to keep going forward.
So, Bronson, look, we appreciate your time here, but quickly, just tell us what you've been up to. Tell the fans what you've been up to after such a long career in baseball. What are you doing these days?
Yeah, I'm just having a good time, man. I've been going down to the clubhouse. They make me a clubhouse shirt, man. I've been cleaning the shoes and putting dirty laundry away with the guys sometimes when the team's at home. And I've been snow skiing a bunch. I've been writing some music with some friends in L.A. I've been playing shows. Played for the Cubs and the Red Sox down in spring training at the end. In Fort Myers, a couple of shows. I've just been having a good time. Went to see Pearl Jam in Brazil. I'm just enjoying my freedom, man, and not having to be at the ballpark every day.
Good for you, man.
Must be nice, bro. Enjoy it. You earned it.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks,
Bronson.
There's Bronson Arroyo.
I appreciate it, guys.